NewsNation political contributor and former aide to President George W. Bush. Denise Skitsum joins me now. Denise, thanks for being here. Always good to talk to you.
Hey, Brooke, how are you?
Good. So let's talk about these headlines out of Maine. Obviously caught a lot of people by surprise. Again, we should mention these are serious allegations, but allegations that Graham Plattner denies. Even still, he's now officially dropped out of the race. What are you hearing about the conversations behind the scenes to replace him?
Yeah, well, I just want to say that if, in fact, he actually is guilty of what his latest accuser says is true, then Plattner's not just a sexual assault person, he's a rapist. I mean, I think that needs to be said loud and clear, especially as a woman. I feel like it's important that we establish things as they are. And it shouldn't surprise anybody that these things were coming. This didn't come out of left field. He's also the one who wrote on Reddit that women should grow up and take responsibility for any time sexual assault is inflicted on them. So this was really an issue that was the Democrats in the making. They are the ones that caused him. They enabled him. Let's say that. They enabled him through and through at every step along the way. And it was I was shocked actually to see Democrats that I generally respect, people that have generally held the line on civility and have said things that everyone seemed to believe about believing women, continually fall and really only because of political expediency. As you said, Maine was essential for Democrats to reclaim the U.S. Senate. And they looked at that as an opportunity to take any candidate, even someone as flawed and evil as Graham Plattner, and run with them. And they gave up all of their moral authority to do so. So I think what they did is they tried to win the battle, and they're going to lose the war.
How much of a hurdle is this for Democrats?
There's no way that they can successfully vet a candidate, which was their issue.
Is it because of the timing now?
Yeah, it's a matter of timing. But also, let's talk about Susan Collins. She has come against a lot of headwinds over the course of her career. It is not easy to be a Republican holding down a seat in a very purple, really like a blue state. And she has maintained her independence well. You know, Maine's not a bunch of loony left-wingers. Maine, I went to college in Maine. I went to Bowdoin College, and one of my professors, who's really a mentor of mine, is the guy who's behind the rise of Angus King, the independent, and Susan Collins as well. And so he understood and he taught me what Mainers are really like. They're very independent in the way that they approach things. They're not party loyal. And Susan Collins really fits that mold, which is why she always overcomes the odds and prevails. So it was going to be a tough race regardless. She was polling 3 to 4 points ahead of Graham Plattner, irrespective of this latest, blow up. And now that you've seen that Democrats are trying to replace him at the last minute, there's no way to just get the basics of name ID out there the way that they need to, much less push against sort of the established reputation that Susan Collins really has and is respected for.
Maine Democrats have now announced that there's going to be a convention that'll take place on July 25th to find a replacement. Are there any names that are really coming to the front that could help them here in Maine?
Well, I've heard a couple of them mentioned, but if any sort of effort is made to promote one over the other, which I think Democrats are really trying hard not to do, even though I'm sure that they're dying to, I think they've learned a lesson from the snafu with Kamala Harris, which was the most undemocratic thing we've ever seen, which was a party establishment choosing the candidate that they wanted to run. Clearly, they've taken a page from that playbook and said, we're not going to go back there. We've learned our lesson. But that's not actually helping them move the ball forward either in trying to defeat Susan Collins. So it'll be very interesting to see how much Graham Plattner plays into, how much he weighs into what nominee is actually chosen. And I think that if I were him, I would really stay in the background. But he's clearly not paying attention to what other people think about him. I mean, he went down fighting and refusing to accept any sort of responsibility for his own actions and his own downfall.
Interesting, too, to see the parallels as well when you talk about the Harris campaign and now what's happening here in Maine and the timing of it all. And now Democrats kind of forced into this last minute trying to vet somebody and get a candidate that they hope can still make a play in Maine. Denise Skitsum,
I don't envy them that position.
Yeah, difficult, no doubt. All right, Denise, I got to wrap it there, but thank you for joining us. Always appreciate the conversation.
Thanks for having me.
All right.